Welcome to the latest installment of the Highspots TV interview series. It is our pleasure this evening to have with us Fifi the Maid. Fifi, welcome back to the business almost. Been out for quite some time now.
Bonjour. Ça va?
First question, you threw me for a loop. First question, really naturally, is how did you get started in the business? How did you break into WCW?
I thought the first question would be, do I really speak French? How did I break into it is actually because of the French. I had just studied overseas at the Sorbonne and was going to be an international lawyer. And I was studying over there, and I came to Atlanta, and there was an audition for someone who spoke French. And I thought, I'm going to check this out. I'll see what it's all about. And they pretty much hired me on the spot. I just got lucky.
What were you? You were in Atlanta already. What were you doing at the time?
I was stopping through Atlanta because my mother and my stepfather had moved here for probably about 6 months. And they decided, we're going to move on to Florida. They missed the ocean because I'm originally from California. So they came to Atlanta, and so I came to visit them. And it was my mother that actually told me about it. She goes, "Oh, they're looking for someone who speaks French." And I said, well, let me go see what it's about. And I went in, and I was interviewed by Rick, Sting. There's a few other wrestlers there. I think Tony Schiavone was there. I can't remember who it was. Somebody else will come to mind. Was there, and they were saying this is the one. So it worked out, and we sat down and talked contracts, and next thing you know, international law was put on the back burner.
What did they tell you in that initial meeting? We're looking for someone to stand there and look pretty. We're looking for someone to go on the road with Rick. What was the job description that was given to you?
The job description was you needed to speak French, you needed to look good, and you needed to get along with the guys. You needed to have a sense of humor, and they basically were playing off of me. So they would say things to me and see my reactions, and they wanted to see if I could react to what they were saying. So a lot of reaction improv stuff.
Anything you remember them saying? Any examples of that?
Yeah, they said one thing that I'll never forget is Rick said, I just want to know one thing. Do you like to hang out and have a lot of fun? And I said, of course, who wouldn't? He goes, okay, that's it, she's the girl. So he was all about, this is a fun business, it's hard work, but it's a lot of fun too. And if you can't have fun with it, then, they didn't want me around.
What were your initial impressions of everyone in that meeting, your knee-jerk reaction upon meeting, let's say, Flair, Sting, and Schiavone?
The funny thing is, I didn't know who any of them were. And so my first reaction was like, wow, these are interesting people, auditioning me, because they all had a different character about them, and very flashy and very, outspoken, and I thought, this is very interesting. But they were so much fun and so sweet and so just really good to me. So I loved it. I had a great impression.
What was the next step in that process? Were you sent somewhere to learn anything about the business, or were you thrown on camera immediately?
The next step was they said, okay, after we sat down and talked contracts, the next step was we need to get you ASAP to the dressmaker. And, get measured and get over there and get this costume made. And they had told me at the time, Ted Turner owned wrestling, and that he wanted to make it more of a family business. So your French maid costume is not going to be the norm, because I'm thinking French maid, I'm thinking really short, really, slinky top and everything. They said, no, he wants it to be a little more family. So your dress will be a little more conservative. And as we can see, it is.
So we've got the girl to play the part. We've got the costume. Right.
Then I'm thrown to the wolves. I go out the first show. I think it was a Flair for the Gold, and I want to say it was. It could have been. Dusty Rhodes created my character. So I'm thinking it could have been one of the shows that it hit. The first one was with him when he came onto the show. So he was, basically checking. It was the first Flair. We had the set, everything, and seeing how I would be and how I would react. And, I remember after the show, they said, you did a great job. But he would just tell me, walk me through. Now, we did have little skits that we looked at, and they would say, okay, this is what we're looking for, or, do this or do that. But they wanted me to have a certain style that I would always come out, something I'd always come out and do. And it was always that little spin. I'd come out and Rick would say, walk that aisle, and I'd walk and do my little spin, and that was always supposed to be my little mark, and occasionally they'd throw things in for me to do, but, I pretty much had the same thing every time, so it wasn't too hard to learn.
You said they had you watching skits. We talking wrestling or
wrestling skits? Yeah.
You remember anything in particular that they were like, be like this or do like this?
Well, it's funny. I mean, they told me Missy Hyatt was around during the time that I was doing this, and they told me she's a different type of person. Do not be like her. They wanted, and I don't know, at first
in front of the camera or behind the camera?
Obviously behind the camera. They're like, she's a different character. We don't want you to emulate her. We don't want you to be like her. You were supposed to come out with class. And I'm not saying she wasn't classy. Don't get me wrong. But they wanted it to be a little more upscale and classy with my appearance, and a little more conservative. We fought to get. I know there's a poster out there with the bikini. We fought to get that. Rick was like, we need to have something. We want to have it where she shows her sex appeal in a different way, because they wanted it to be conservative. So,
what were your impressions of Missy Hyatt?
She, she was nice, but, to my face. And who knows, maybe, she had all good intentions. But behind the scenes, she was always plotting to get us in the ring so she could take me down. So she really wanted to show me what it was like to be in that ring. But they never would allow it. Rick was really good about protecting me, and he knew that she would probably be pretty brutal with me.
Do you think she wanted to establish that she was the alpha
female?
Yes,
absolutely. Yeah. And it was, there were things that were done that, later when I look back on it, that show me that, yeah, she wanted to make sure her mark was there, and she was queen of the WCW at the time. The guys would always say, oh, she's feeling very threatened by you coming on here. And so that was, and meanwhile, I have no clue what's going on. I'm just going over there, just doing my thing, having fun. But there's a lot of behind the scenes people, a lot of jealousy going on. So that was tough.
What kind of things that you look back on now and you see differently?
Well,
like
I remember Missy would tell me, one time with Missy, just an example, she said, yeah, I'll let you know when they need you, out there, because sometimes we didn't have monitors to know, or I'll let you know. Well, she didn't let me know. And I was running late, and they were like, where are you? Missy was going to tell me. Oh, Missy, she wasn't going to tell you. I mean, they told me, don't even listen to her. She's, she'll have it out for you. Okay, great. But other things, everybody wants to be on top. And it's a business, it's entertainment. Everyone wants to be the most popular. So you can imagine, clothes were missing, a lot of yelling, arguments. But nothing out of the norm, nothing that I wouldn't expect from, from wrestlers.
Was there any other instances of anyone reacting negatively to you, like Missy, or was everyone else pretty welcoming?
All the wrestlers were very welcoming. Yeah, they were so wonderful. They were, they were great. The announcers, Mean Gene Okerlund, just wonderful. I hosted a pay-per-view. I think it was Battle Bowl. Yeah. I don't even remember where it was. Maybe it was Houston. I'm not sure.
I think it was.
Okay. Well, hey, I got a memory there. But and we hosted that, and it may not have turned out the greatest. Like, I don't think it was my greatest performance, but he was so wonderful to me, and no one would ever tell me that it was horrible or anything. Everyone was always very complimentary. So I had a great time on there. Like, everyone was super nice to me. I got very lucky.
Very cool. What was the reaction to the question of who is this new girl? Where did she come from? Did the boys kind of know that, or was there talking behind the scenes? Oh, she's somebody's girlfriend. She's somebody's something.
Yeah, there was always talk about who is she dating? Who is she dating that she got on this show? And I wasn't dating anybody. And I remember Rick gave me some advice, and he said, listen, never be caught alone with any of the wrestlers walking around or the hotels or anything, because then all of a sudden people will assume that you're having a fling, or you're with that wrestler. And I was like, so it was very weird. Like, say someone came up to talk to you and you're thinking, oh my God, there's a camera over there. got to be careful because I don't want any, rumors, spreading around. But, and then a lot of times they'd pull new talent on, and until they knew who I was, sometimes it would kind of just be, not so nice, kind of like, oh, get out of the way type. Then once they've established who I was, they were much nicer. So
there was one long-standing rumor that we've heard a lot that we wanted to kind of ask about, which was that Ole Anderson was allegedly involved with a female Turner executive. This new girl shows up on TV, and a lot of people are like, "This must be the girl." Did you ever hear that one then, or since then?
I've heard it now. I never heard it then, and I can squash those rumors. It was never me, So if it was somebody, it wasn't me. Nope. So I never had nothing going on in the scenes.
Any other outlandish rumors you remember that you'd like to put to rest that you've heard either then or since then?
No, just about the only thing that I like to put to rest is who I was, because nobody, when it's portrayed, if you ever pulled up Fifi, it would always be portrayed as somebody else playing the part. And I want to let everybody know that it's Wendy Barlow played Fifi. And I was the only Fifi. There was never anybody else who played my character. And I continue to keep the outfit and, wear it almost 20 years later.
Do you think you'd have an easier time now with the internet and with everything if you were on TV today, you could verify it instantly?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think it was Scotty Riggs who told me, you missed out on a time era where the internet explosion came out, and it just, boom, took over. Everyone was on there, and all the facts, and everyone became big off of that. And I was right after my time era, and so I missed out on that. And so now it's kind of like playing catch up, and I've got to just set the record straight, and I just want my credit for the character that was created for me.
How do you feel about that? There's so many opportunities for female wrestling talent out there, websites, members websites, matches, all kinds of things. Is that something you're looking to pursue, or looking to, as you're kind of edging your way back in the business, or are you content to just kind of do a project such as this where you just kind of talk about the past more than a new project?
Right. Talking about the past is what brought me here. But if there were opportunities available, I would love to pursue and see what was out there. I mean, I would love to, revitalize Fifi for, who knows how long. But just to bring her back, maybe for some skits or see what she could do out there. But getting in the ring and wrestling, that was never me. So I was always a character. So I see how it's really gone in that era where the women are in the wrestling ring. And that I could not do.
Was it ever discussed of we want Fifi to wrestle a year from now or any time in the future?
It was just with the Missy incident. She was the only one who was pushing. I want to get, Fifi in the ring and take her down. So I don't know what she had out for me, but that was the only time, because other than that, I was just going to be a character, and I was just going to escort Rick and be his valet, and then I was actually going to move on to work. When I left, this is something many people don't know, is I was actually working an angle where I was going to be doing a year's worth of work with Sting. So Fifi was going to be leaving Rick and heading over with Sting. So that would have played out really interesting, but I was actually at that time ready to leave.
Tell us about the story with Sting that never came to air.
I don't know the full extent of what it was going to be. It was definitely going to be, he wasn't a heel, so it wasn't going to be anything, negative, but he just, I don't know, he was working on it with them, and it was just going to be a year's worth of work, and somehow I was going to end up working with him. So I never really got into it, because that was at the time when I decided I was going to leave.
This is the very end of 93?
94.
Early in 94?
Yeah.
What, you mentioned valeting for Rick on the road. What were the instructions kind of given to you? Did the role change at any point where we want you to go from doing the interviews to going to ringside with Rick? What was told to you, and by whom, that came to you and said, hey, we want you to start doing this now?
I would say I pretty much dealt with Dusty Rhodes, and Rick was really doing a lot of the, him and Dusty were working it all out, and we'd always had the flair for the golds, but they wanted to get me out of there too. So they wanted to have, expand everything. So we started with, because that was the other thing, they wanted me to escort them out and try to do little things by the ringside, but they couldn't decide if they wanted me in the French maid outfit or evening gowns. And finally Rick was the one who said, let's put her in evening gowns. So let's leave the French maid in, the little set, and then let her come out in evening gowns. And I remember the first time I came out in evening gown, people were like, wait a minute, who is that? Is that Fifi? Because everyone was so used to this outfit. But that was a nice change because I was ready to get out of the outfit as well.
Was it tough to you coming in pretty cold and not knowing anything about the business to adapt to being out there in the live setting at ringside, or was it something that you found you picked up pretty naturally?
The walking out part was very easy. Once we were walking out, that's great, but I didn't know how to get in the ring, and that was hard. I'm like, wait, I'm in these heels in my dress. How do I get in the ring? And then occasionally, because occasionally some of the wrestlers had to pick me up and swing me over into the ring. That was part of this, the whole skit. And they didn't know their own strength, and I'd have bruises on my arms, and I was like, oh my God, and they scared me. I was little, and they scared me when I was out there, so it did take some getting used to, definitely.
Were you ever taught basic things, even as far as getting in and out of the ring, or maybe
Yes.
taking a bump or anything?
Not taking a bump, because that was one that we said I was not going to do. But I was taught about getting in and out of the ring. We practiced that a few times. And also dealing with the fans that were kind of crazy at the bar. So when I was down and around, to worry about, always keep your eyes open, because there's some fans that might try to grab you, or, you never know. And there were a few. So I had to be on my toes in the, by the ring and watching the fans.
Well, what instructions were you given as far as watching the fans?
Well, if any were to get, if I felt uncomfortable, just mosey my way over to the security they had set up there and just tap them, and then they would walk by and check it out. That would be the cue that something might be going on.
How valuable was Ric Flair?
Extremely valuable. Extremely. I can tell you there was a time that he got very upset about something that happened on set, and he stormed out like he was going to quit. Of course, we know he'd never quit. And I remember Eric Bischoff telling me, you need to go find him. We need to talk to him, because if he goes, you go. And I was like, what? And I'm like, Rick, get back here. But that was all worked out. I think that was in New Orleans, actually, and it all worked out.
You remember what upset him so much?
I want to say, I remember he was upset because he was very protective of me, and he was also very classy with how he wanted things to turn out. And we were working an angle with Rick Rude, and there was a live pay-per-view where Rick was to grab me and pick me up. Okay, I'm going to tell you this one because not many people probably know this. But he was to grab me and pick me up, kind of throw me over his shoulder, and then take off with me. Instead, and bless his heart, because I loved Rick Rude and miss him dearly, but instead he picked me up. He thought it would be funny. He picked me up sideways, and he lifted me up over him, and he put his face, where he shouldn't have, and he thought that was hilarious. Well, I know the other Rick, Flair, was very upset about that, and he always was watching what was going on. Ric Flair is very observant, and that's what's made him so, amazing out there, but he knows what's going on at all times, and that was one thing that really upset him. Meanwhile, I was upset, but I'm just Fifi.
You're someone that was put in a very unique set of circumstances. There are so many people in the business who would do anything to be attached to Ric Flair, and here you are on day one attached to Ric Flair, the star of stars in a lot of people's minds. What do you remember as far as traveling with Rick and the day-to-day stuff, and just kind of impressions that he made on you on a day-to-day basis? How he felt about the business, anything in that realm?
He loves the business. The business is his life. He gives it 110%, and he I felt like he always was really good to everybody. I mean, I don't know what other people say, but I would watch him and I'd say, God, he's just such a good guy. And whoever he worked with, he wanted them to look good as well. You know, where some I saw where they're always thinking about themselves, he was very good about trying to make the other person look really good as well. And he did that with me as, you know, definitely too. He was very classy when we would go and travel, and we drove a lot to different places. Always taking care of whoever was in the car, whoever he was with. You know, let's get some drinks. He takes care of everybody. You know, is everyone okay? Let's get some food. I'll take care. You know, he's just a caretaker. I mean, he was just so good to me. And there was one time we were going to Anderson, South Carolina, and Mean Gene was in the car, Arn Anderson, Rick, and I, and we're driving along, and a rock shot off the truck and hit the windshield and shattered it, and I had glass all in from my face to my arms, like little pieces all in my, you know, my skin and stuff. And he was so good. You know, we got to take you to the hospital. We got to do all that. I mean, he's just such a nice person and so caring. So yeah, I always felt comfortable and safe when I was with him.
Couple of things that were kind of happening in the business at large around this time I want to ask you about. Maybe you had any level of knowledge about them, or maybe not. Maybe it was under your radar. But Flair comes back to WCW in February of '93, having had a run in New York for the WWF at the time.
Right.
And you get put with him shortly thereafter. From a business standpoint, did he ever express anything to you about maybe wishing he'd stayed in New York, or being or the opposite, being so happy to be back in the Carolinas? Did he ever share any kind of information like that with you?
Yeah, he didn't want to go back to New York. I'll tell you what, I mean, this is why I have a lot of respect for Rick too. Even if he felt bad about someone, he still respects them. Like, even if somebody may have, you know, there been some bad blood or whatever, he would always say, you know what, I don't care what happened, I have respect for this person because they've brought wrestling to this level. You know, and I remember him saying that, something to that extent about Vince, you know, that no matter what, look what he's done for wrestling, you know. So he always had a good appreciation and a great respect for people in the business. I think he was very happy over at WCW. He was very happy to get over there and do everything he did. He was excited. It was all going to be new stuff. I mean, he had his little talk show. I thought he was just on his prime, like the prime, you know. It was just a great time for him.
Another thing that happened in the business at large at this time is they're going to put the Four Horsemen back together. And Tully Blanchard, a legend in the business, is on board, and then all of a sudden he's not. And a fresh face named Paul Roma comes in.
Paul Roma, yeah.
What was your experience in dealing with that, and how the boys felt about Paul Roma kind of getting Tully Blanchard's spot?
Yeah. You know, at first I think they were kind of like standoffish with him. I kind of felt that. They kind of felt like it was a club and he was stepping in. So, like, you know, when the camera shut off, I kind of felt like he went on his own. But then after a while, it was like, you know, they had grown to have a little respect, and they were all friends. You know, I just think that sometimes when you've been with a group for so long, you kind of just bond, you know, more so. But, you know, Paul Roma did well, and he was fine, and we all got along, and it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
You mentioned being in the car with Rick and Arn going to Anderson, and talking about like the group mentality. In the time that you were there, did it ever get to the point that we were in the car with Rick, Arn, and Paul, or did that kind of separation stay there as best you can tell?
I think it stayed there. Yeah, Rick and Arn have, you know, they've been friends for life, and it seemed like I was always with Rick and Arn. You know, every time we were traveling around somewhere. Ricky Steamboat was a lot of times around us. They were good friends. Mean Gene was a lot. He, you know, they really had a great appreciation for him. But yeah, I think Paul Roma did kind of do his own thing. But it could have been on his own, you know. I don't know if he was just kind of that type of person anyways. But he was a good guy.
Your biggest TV angle was with Rick Rude, and we want to examine that in depth. How did that come about? Who was the first person to say, hey, we're going to do this thing with you and Rude? What do you think of it? The formulative days of your big angle with Rick Rude.
I think it was Flair who came to me and he said, hey, we've got this angle. we're gonna work with Rick Rude, and I'm like, who no. And Rick Rude came to the meeting, and we sat down, and Rick, this is another thing, Rick Rude did not know his own strength, because when I worked with him, he'd always say, okay, I'm gonna be real gentle, but then when they're out in the ring and they're on top of what they're doing, it's like gentle goes out the window. But yeah, it was Flair who basically sat me down. Dusty Rhodes had probably created the angle, because Dusty pretty much was behind the scenes at the time. And, we went on and started pursuing it. Now, when Rick Rude found out he was going to do this, he started making the clothes with the faces on them, Rick and Fifi. And I still have the handkerchief that says, I love Rick Rude, and it's, Fifi the French maid on it. And he went all out to make it something really big. And he really wanted that angle to work, and it did. When he came on the show, the Flair for the Gold, and I was walking because I was getting ready to come out onto the set, and I noticed that all the wrestlers were sitting there behind the monitors, and I'm like, this is odd. Why are they all sitting there watching? They're like, have a good time, Fifi. And I'm like, okay, that's great. So I get on the set, and we do the show with Rick Rude, and this is the one where he goes up to... He's telling me I'm a lying cheat, da da da, and I'm like, what? And then he goes and grabs me and kisses me, and then I slug him. And afterwards, I didn't know this was going to happen, and that's why they were at the monitor. Everybody else knew it was going to happen but me. So they wanted to see my reaction because they thought this is going to be good. And I slugged him so hard, my hand hurt so bad. I was like, oh my God, and I was shaking. I literally was shaking because I'm like, what just happened here? So they got me on that one, and they thought it was... that they wanted that reaction, so they didn't tell me. But that one was tough.
From there, we go to the pay-per-view, and now you're firmly at Ric Flair's side in the corner and everything. This is a pretty big deal. This is Ric Flair and Rick Rude wrestling over the World Championship on pay-per-view. Were you still at a point where you were pretty nervous about things, or did you feel comfortable by this point?
By that point, I felt comfortable as Fifi, but there were some things that I wasn't used to, like the wrestlers. I wasn't used to all the sweating, the drenching sweat, and I knew that I was going to have to go up and maybe kiss one, and they're like drenched in sweat. And there was one, I think it was probably one of the matches for the belts. And Rick Rude was supposed to kiss me again. And I looked up because they were telling me to go over because it's time. Yeah, get over there. And I looked up, and his nose was running as well. So like he's sweating, his nose is running. And I turned, and I almost literally got sick. I was like, oh my God, because his nose was running into his mouth. I hate to say this, but it was very hard for me to see all that, and I wouldn't go over there. And then finally they're like, get over there. So I did, and it all worked out in the end, but I just wasn't used to a lot of that.
You seem to have a really firm grasp of the fundamentals and what the business is about, that you got to get it done regardless.
Yeah.
Who do you credit with that, Rick?
Rick, yeah, absolutely. Rick, I would say, was, my big supporter, and he taught me a lot, yeah. He was the one who would tell me, what to expect in this business, what to not worry about, and what was expected,
After the run with Rick Rude, the very next pay-per-view after New Orleans is the one where you're hosting with Gene Okerlund. That run's over now. Flair is going to go into a very serious deal with Vader. What were they telling you at the time, that we're gonna take you away from Rick, we're gonna have you with Gene, or was it just something that ended up happening?
That just ended up happening. They wanted to, they just wanted me to get out there with Gene and see what we can do. And there was a lot of mixed communications, because I think Eric was in Japan at the time, and they didn't know if I was going to speak French or English. They're like, oh, just kind of like pretend like you don't speak anything. It was a very hard thing, and I look back on it now thinking I wish I had more direction, because I didn't have a lot of direction. And when Eric came back, he actually was like, why didn't someone tell her to do this or that? So I don't think that was my best performance, being up there with Mean Gene, because I didn't know whether I was supposed to speak English or not. And they were pushing to get me to be speaking English, towards that time.
Did you feel like it's an accurate statement to say that you didn't get the opportunities to really show what you could do at that point?
Absolutely, yeah. I definitely didn't. I mean, but it's, I understood it's a man's sport and I'm a character, but, wrestling is the big event. So, I mean, in my mind, I might say I didn't get the opportunities, but in their minds, it's all about wrestling anyway, so.
Does anything come to mind that you would have liked to have done at this point? That, Flair's going into this thing with Vader. We can't have Vader killing Fifi necessarily, right. But is there anything with Rick, with someone else, that you would have liked to have had the chance to do?
I probably would have liked to have a chance to do more of the pay-per-views or more of the announcing or things like that down the road. That was something I was looking into, but I would, it was something new to me as well, so I would have needed some more direction. But we had actually gone in the studio, and I did practice a few times, announcing and things like that.
Having you up there with Gene at Battle Bowl, it seemed like that was the direction they were headed, maybe doing interviews, doing something in that realm.
That's what they were looking at, and that was kind of like what we were talking about. But then the Sting thing came up, and I was going to go off and work with him, and that would have been great. I do kind of regret that I didn't work with him. I just at the time I was ready to kind of take a break.
Were there any conversations about who or what you would have been with Sting? Were they going to keep Fifi? Were they going to turn Fifi into a surfer chick or something? Or
well, they were going to change the outfit. I would have still had Fifi as the name, but I would have been more like an American's, girl. So it was going to be a little more, California style.
Did anyone? Were you talking about the time frame and from pay-per-view to pay-per-view? The next pay-per-view after when you were with Gene is Starrcade. Rick goes against Vader, and it's a big personal story. Did anyone that you're aware of bring up that we've had Rick on TV with Fifi for months and months and months now, and now all of a sudden, with his career on the line against Vader, we're showing Rick at home with his wife and his kids?
Yeah.
Did anyone point out kind of the
absolutely
that not really added up?
Yeah, that was I don't know who pushed that angle. Maybe Rick wanted to get his family involved. We never talked about it. When his family was involved, I was not involved. But it did kind of, people would say, this is so bizarre. He's supposed to be the styling, profiling Fifi character. Fifi's with him and, all this. And then the family shows up. And they're like, okay, what happened, But, there were a lot of questions about what angle they were moving into.
Let's talk a little bit about the nightlife and the road and the fun aspect of the business that Rick kind of tried to impart in you. What are some of your fondest memories being on the road with Rick? Nights at the bar, anything in that realm? Flair's reputation speaks for itself as far as being the king of the parties, the king of everything. What do you remember about being on the road with Rick and the nightlife aspect?
Well, because we taped those shows so late and we did a lot of the shows so late, our dinners would start at midnight, So we would find whatever was open and go out and eat. And it would usually be a big group of us. It was never just, Rick and I. It was always a group of people. And it just was, it was like we just left the set and went, it never ended, It was like the same fun and the same energy. There would be dancing going on. There would be, drinking, eating, just very happy times, I can't think of any negative things, just very happy times.
Any memories of any ribs the wrestlers pulled on each other that you were witness to or possibly a part of?
Let me think. I can't think of any off the top of my head, no. But I'm sure they happened, Because a lot of times when I was done doing my stuff, okay, you have to remember back in this time too, I remember Missy Hyde and I, and then all the guys. So with dressing room space and all this, sometimes we may be far away, and all the guys are dressing, in one area. So a lot of times when I'm heading back over, they're all together. The guys are together, and we're just in another area. So we, it's definitely different when women are around. I don't know how it is today because there's a lot more women I see out there. But when I was doing it back in the day, it was, separated. We were separated.
Want to run down some names that we haven't really touched on yet or haven't elaborated on, and just kind of give us your memories of them, your impressions of them or being around them. One name that you mentioned, Rick Steamboat.
Loved him. Great guy, great family guy, and I wish him well. I know that he had an aneurysm, and I wish him well.
The Nasty Boys.
Oh my God, they were so cool. They were so much fun when they were out. They were just so fun. Yes, great guys.
Gene Okerlund.
Gene Okerlund, Mr. Smooth Operator. Love him, love him, love him. Great guy. Had a lot of fun too.
Lord Stephen Regal.
Very serious. He seemed very serious to me.
Steve Austin.
Steve Austin. He was an up-and-coming rising star, and he was a great guy. Yeah.
We were talking earlier about things that were happening in the business at large. There's always been the stories that we've heard that Rick wanted to do more with Austin and never got the chance to. Were you privy to any of that or hearing about it?
I knew there were some issues at the time. I know, Brian Pillman and Steve Austin were the Hollywood Blondes. And I actually loved that skit. I loved them, and they were cute together. But I know Steve really wanted to go off and do more. And sometimes I would see him, and I just felt like he was not happy. He wanted to, and then he took off, and look at him now.
Mick Foley, Cactus Jack.
Oh my God, he is a wonderful person. Just a really great heart.
Eric Bischoff.
Complex. Complex. Let's just say that, he's a complex. He was nice. He was business. And then, I heard a lot of things. People talked. And, of course, I wasn't involved in a lot of the things I heard. But a lot of people really got hurt by him. So I felt bad for them.
What would you say he was like to work for?
He was very, I would say, a little hard. He was very demanding, very, but he's a perfectionist, so I don't fault him on that. He did a great job, but there was a lot of power issues involved with his name.
Any issues that you witnessed firsthand or got caught up in, maybe that you didn't want to be?
Just with, just like I said, when I had the thing where I'll never forget when he said to me, you better make sure that Rick is not leaving because if he goes, you go. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? And he was very serious. And I'm like, that was the first seriousness I saw in him. And I was like, are you crazy? But, then all was good. And I just treated it like a business and tried not to get involved in the personal stuff.
If you look at the business, if you look at the books from year to year, 93 is actually one of the worst years WCW ever has from a money standpoint.
That is so funny you touch on that because I'll tell you a funny story.
Please do. But the picture you're painting is that morale was pretty good. Everybody was getting along very well. You did not find you didn't find a lot of negative energy.
Well, I mean, things happen. There were things that happened, but then again, everyone when they all got together were all friendly. It was like it's really like one big family. Everything gets swept under the carpet, and then you all get back together. I mean, people all want to be number one, so of course you're always going to have the jealousy and the competition. But when you mention 93 and being the worst year, thanks a lot. But no, what I want to tell you about that is I was on the set of The Flair for the Gold one time, and Rick was telling one of the producers, he goes, we really have a problem here when Fifi walks out, and I hear more applause for her than the wrestlers. And I'll never forget that. He's like, she's getting more applause than some of these wrestlers. This is not good. So they had a lot of building up to do, and that's what they were working on.
A name that you've mentioned a couple of times, Arn Anderson.
Teddy Bear. He is so sweet. Yeah, just a sweet teddy bear. Nice guy. Good manners. Just, real, just remind me of a good old Southern guy,
What kind of dealings did you have with Sting? If he apparently... He seemed pretty gung-ho on being with you.
Yeah, because we were getting ready to work on that angle, but he had come on the Flair for the Gold, and and he was around during all that time, and he was working his angles of what he wanted to do. And so it was just going to be his next move. It wasn't like, we were always together or anything. We just were friends in the business, and it just so happened that was going to be the next move.
What were your impressions of him based on the time that you spent with him?
I really liked him. I thought he was a great person. We had something in common. I think, if I remember correctly, his wife went to my high school in California. So and he was just a nice guy. I never, I'd see him at the gym sometimes because him and Lex owned the Main Event gyms, and so I would go work out there, and always really nice, very genuine.
What brought you to the end of your run?
I had so much schooling behind me that there was something inside me that said, I really want to use my education for something. And I really wanted to teach. So I actually went off and was teaching at a private high school. So it's kind of odd that I wanted to do that, which is actually another form of entertainment, because you have to be very entertaining to keep their, attention spans, but especially high schoolers. But it was really kind of hard transition because a lot of them recognized me. And I would always deny it. No, it's not me. Gosh, we look the same, whatever. But I really wanted to go off and teach. I wanted to use my degrees for something, and it just so happened at the time that was what I wanted to do in my life.
Did you keep up with the business from that point on?
A little. Rick and I stayed friends forever. We're still friends, and so through him, if they were in town, I might go see what they're doing. But I got really busy with the education part.
Did you get the itch to maybe try and contact some people, or maybe try to get back into it when the late 90s came and Sable and Sunny and a lot of the girls are starting to be really heavily
popular.
Featured? Did you get the itch to maybe put some feelers out there and see if there was anything to do, or were you content to...
During that time, I think I was more, when I saw all that going on, I thought to myself, I would love to get back in the business, but I actually wasn't going to go in the wrestling business. I thought maybe I'll go see what's out there, do a few commercials, maybe see what's, movie-wise, TV, all that. So I kind of wanted to see what was available in that era. And I did a few things, and so, I had a lot of fun.
Did you have any opinions, or were you keeping up enough to have an opinion once things started going to a more adult themes and you saw girls doing stuff that would have never been talked about at Turner in the early 90s?
Right.
Were you keeping up enough to have an opinion on that?
I did. I saw all that, and I was like, it sells. I mean, it's a business, and wrestling... I just thought it was getting harder and harder, like the business. And so I thought, ooh, maybe this is not for me anyways, because that wasn't my style. And I couldn't see myself out there doing some of the things. And granted, I have nothing, wrong. There's nothing wrong with what they're doing. That's entertainment. And they all look great, I'm like envious of how great they look. But it just wasn't what I would have been comfortable with. So I knew that maybe they had gone a different route than what I would have wanted to.
Where do you think you would have drawn the line if say you had stayed in the business? Was there anything that Turner would have come to you and said that you'd have been like, I'm not doing it, I'll walk before I do this?
Right. It's funny, I kind of joke to my friends and I say, I think I'm the only one in the business that, well, and God forbid this may not be true, but that didn't have any plastic done. And, so if they came to me and said, you know what, we would really like you to have implants, I probably would have been, no. But, it's about the sexuality, I think, more so as the years have gone on than my little character. I mean, there always was a hidden sense of it, but it's more out there. And I don't know if that would be something I would want to be involved in.
Were you ever implicated with anything that you want to clear up that never happened, or maybe address the most outlandish thing you've ever heard about yourself, other than there being more than one Fifi?
Right. Not really. I was pretty, unless you know something I don't know. Come on, tell me. I think I was pretty clean back then. in terms of the rumor mill, I don't remember too many. Do you have something you want to tell me?
I don't, but I'm intrigued by it because how do you keep your nose clean?
Exactly.
That's a story.
That's a story in itself.
In the interviews that we've done, that's a story that we don't get to hear a lot. How do you keep your nose clean in the wrestling business?
It must have been that I didn't stick around long enough, because maybe if I did stick around longer, it wouldn't be that clean, because I worry. I mean, there were some worries that if I would have continued on and on the path, and if I think about it in my head, that things might have turned out differently in my life. Because there's a lot of temptation and a lot of things going on that are not probably appropriate.
Did any of that factor into your decision to leave the business, or was it more the desire to teach?
Well, desire to teach was very strong, but I think some of the things, they did factor in.
You think you started to feel certain things kind of creeping up?
Yes, and I started thinking that, I just didn't think, I truly didn't think that I would be able to continue working with so many people who I kind of felt like in the end they would have probably been out to just, get me, It's like, that seems like the business is. It's like, you don't know who to trust, I thank God I was with Rick and I did trust him. But as you continue on and they start moving you around, there's just not much. It was very hard to trust people in that business.
Were there specific instances that kind of smartened you up or made you more cynical?
Yeah, there were, and those I would probably have to just keep on, private. But yeah, there were things that I thought to myself, oh, I don't want to ever be in situations like this again. So yeah, it's definitely a man's world, and not having many female companions around to lean on was probably a downfall for me. I definitely would have rather had some girlfriends that were there to be able to talk and hang around, because being around all those guys and everything that they're doing is a little tough.
I think going back to how you keep your nose clean in the business, I think one of the pitfalls that a lot of people, male and female, fall into is they don't really have anything else, any other avenue to go to. Right. And maybe that's part of the story, is you had credentials, you could go teach, you could go do this. What are some of the other things that you've done with yourself since leaving the business?
I taught. I actually have starred. I've had appearances in movies. The Joneses right now with David Duchovny and Demi Moore. It'll actually be out on video on Tuesday, but I play a neighbor in that. I did some stuff with Halloween H2. Was in Hall Pass recently with Owen Wilson, and I just kind of dabble in it. Did a few commercials and little things because I still wanted to keep my feet in the entertainment business. I enjoy it, I really do, but was just a little hesitant about a few things.
How important has it been to keep in shape and to still? I mean, you look the same.
Oh, thank you.
How important has that been as far as the cosmetic effect of the entertainment industry? You talked about never wanting to get anything done.
And that's something I want to make clear too. I have never had any, cosmetic surgery or anything. I've just stayed true to myself, and but not to rule that out one day, but I just enjoy working out. I've always have. I used to work out with the wrestlers too, and that was fun, but I enjoy working out, eating well, and being happy and living life. So I think that's pretty much kept me looking young.
Is there any place that you would like to see Fifi show up again? Wrestling, yes. Something else, anything else?
I've talked with Rick about it. I said, Rick, you've got to have Fifi come back on in some shape or form on TNA and just kind of surprise everybody and come in and maybe, boot off whoever you're with right at the moment, or do something crazy. Some little skit on there. It doesn't have to be long term, but just for old time's sake.
What's Rick's reaction to that been?
He thinks that'd be great. So, but we'll see what happens down the road.
Sum up your experiences in the wrestling business.
Exciting, fascinating, hard. There's definitely some hard stuff. Entertaining. And also very educating.
From what you could gather from that initial meeting and the initial times, did you get more or less what you expected? Was anything drastically different than you expected?
I think I got what I expected, because from the meeting, the initial meeting, there was a lot of respect. And I truly, truly, in my heart, believe I did have a lot of respect when I was on the show. So I got what I wanted and enjoyed every minute of it. I wouldn't trade it for the world. It was great, and I have truly a lot of respect for the business and for the wrestlers.
Any regrets?
Any regrets? Well, the one regret that I didn't work with Sting, that I did leave and didn't run with that angle because that would have been fun. That's probably the only regret. Yeah.
Well, we thank you very much for sitting down with us today. A vastly different take on the business than we normally hear. Someone that had a good time and appreciated that good time and got out and has been able to exist in the real world and remain a charming and very well-spoken individual. We appreciate you sitting down with us today.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
The following DVD presentation was originally produced for Highspots TV, your online home for the best shoot interviews, matches, and original content. Highspots TV. The future is now.